welcome to Yoga Berry, your yoga for scoliosis community. My name is Christine Jareggi-Berry, and I'm so excited to be talking to Dr. Loren Fishman today. Loren is Medical Director of Manhattan Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation in New York City. He's the author of 10 books, more than 90 academic articles, and a world-renowned pioneer in the use of yoga in medical conditions. He's also spent 3 years in India before going to medical school and has used yoga to improve conditions such as osteoporosis and scoliosis. So a lot of you will have read his study about using yoga poses to reduce scoliosis curves, which is exactly what we'll be talking about today. So welcome, Loren, and thank you so much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So we're going to dive straight in, if that's okay with you. And I would love to know what made you do the study in the first place, and what are some of the results that you've seen?
Well, the study in the first place goes back 25 years when I had a small office in my apartment. Actually, I was a professor at the time, and I just saw some patients. And a yoga teacher brought me a patient, her mother, who was a wee bit sort of a bird of a lady. She was in her middle 60s. She had 108 degrees of scoliosis, and she was dying of it. Her heart was involved. Her lungs were, deeply compromised by the situation. She couldn't have surgery exactly because of those situations. So I tried A, B, and C, and Z. I did everything I could for her. And eventually I tried some yoga. And I said to her, I don't know if this will slow it down. Maybe if we're really lucky, it will stop it. And I designed poses just on the basis of the physiology and the way the muscles attach and so on. And about 4 months later, she was coming once a month. She came and she said, maybe I'm kidding. I said, maybe I'm kidding myself, but it seems to me that you look better. And we got an x-ray, and she had gone from 108 degrees to 68 degrees in 4 months. Now, this is how I got started doing this. And I said, I know what the success was due to in that case. I had a secret weapon because the woman's daughter was a yoga teacher, and she made her mother do the poses every day. And I realized that it was that persistence that really was one of the chief reasons she improved. She's still my patient. She's in her late 90s now. She's even smaller and more bird-like, a lovely woman, lives in Connecticut. It actually was another patient that I saw was a relative of a neighbor. And then afterwards, the neighbor said, this really works. You should let other people know about this. It just didn't dawn on me that someone else might be interested in this. I just used it in my practice. So then I got serious about it, and I did a study. I invited people to come and see me for this. And I now have several hundred patients, published a couple of papers about it. It really seems to work. Now here, you want to know my results? I'll tell you in general terms. There are basically two kinds of scoliosis, at least this is how it's defined. There's adolescent idiopathic scoliosis, and then there's what they call degenerative scoliosis. Now, degenerative scoliosis cannot occur in a very young person, at least I've never seen it. I've seen cases of what's called osteogenesis imperfecta, where the bones are very brittle. They're like stale bread. They're hard on the outside, but they're not at all resistant on the inside. So these people cannot have surgery. The screws and wires and so on will just pull right out. At the same time, they are subject to significant scoliosis. So I've got a couple of those. Otherwise, they all fit into one category, or the second category, degenerative, or they're older people who had adolescent idiopathic and either were or weren't treated but didn't improve. So now they're in their 40s or 50s or 70s, and they have more scoliosis than they had when they were in their teens. Now, the teenagers who do this are, it's a disadvantage. Their bones are volatile. They're still growing and things are changing. They're not as stable as they will be when they're older. And so they're likely to get worse if they're left alone. But this volatility also seems to contribute to their versatility, their ability to improve more. And so on the average here, they get 3.5% better doing my pose once a day for a minute or two. They get better at the rate of 3.5%, whereas the older people get better closer to 2.5% every month. That's provided they do the pose. There's nothing miraculous here. You've got to do.
Yes, that's it, isn't it? If you don't do it, it doesn't work, does it?
It doesn't work. You can't put it under your pillow and hope by osmosis it comes to you.
Yeah. So age definitely has something to do with it, but still 2.5%. That's still quite a lot, isn't it?
Yeah, and I don't think it's the age. I think it's the fact that the bones are growing. I think if you had a person who was 16 who were fully grown, they would be in the 2.5% category. I believe. I'm not sure of that, but I think so. Also, the younger people have another secret weapon, the same secret weapon, actually. Their parents are there to nag them and say, John, did you do it today? And I believe that's a significant factor.
Yes, absolutely, definitely.
In our study, we only included people who did it at least 4 times a week, which means a little better than every other day. So we have people like that, and that may bring down the average. Hard to say, but I see them, every 5 or 6 months. I get another X-ray, and they improve steadily.
So it's one pose or 2 poses, or do you kind of recommend a whole practice with it?
No, it's very simple. It's just a pose or 2. It depends on what's wrong with them, of course. If they have a single lumbar pose, it's one pose. A single lumbar curve, it's just one pose. If they have a single thoracic curve, it's 2 poses. And if they have an S curve or an inverted S curve, where they're both a thoracic and a lumbar curve, then it's 3 poses.
Okay.
So, but they take a minute each. I mean, that's the other tricky thing. I say you must do them as long as you can every day. That doesn't, if your heart starts palpitating or your palms are sweaty and you're feeling dizzy, come on down. This is not, do not kill self. But at the same time, I like them to increase their endurance, because these are either postural muscles or they're like postural muscles. And therefore, they have a formidable adversary on the other side.
So we do the poses one-sided, is that correct?
Absolutely. It's an asymmetrical condition. We must treat it asymmetrically. Yes.
So I have always wondered about this now. If I start doing whatever it might be, the side plank, for example, now only on one side, would it not bring in some other problems or imbalances in my body? For example, the shoulders. I'm always thinking about shoulders if I only start doing strengthening.
You're definitely right. I mean, the big difficulty is that people's shoulders, some of them start to hurt because they're supporting their whole weight on their shoulder, or a good portion of their weight on their shoulders every day. Most people, when they start out, can do it for 20 or 40 seconds. And then as they continue to do it, they can go up to a minute and a minute and a half. I mean, the world record is held by a now 14-year-old cheerleader, a heck of a young girl, who's, by the way, her curve has gone from 32 degrees to 16 degrees in about 9 months. She now holds it for 4.5 minutes. Now that is the closest below her is 2.5 minutes, which another girl. So that's the sort of range. That's most people. It's a minute and 20 seconds after they get good at it. And I encourage them not to have a little clock there that goes ding, because then you're limiting the exposure. You're limiting the amount of work you're putting in. There appears to be a dose-response relationship. The more yoga you put in, the more improvement you get out. And I've got, cases I'd be happy to tell you about that seem to illustrate this.
So let's say, for example, this, this girl obviously seems to be very good at that pose, but let's say someone a little bit more average who does the pose every day. They reduce their curve, they're really happy, and then they stop doing the pose.
I've experimented with that a little. I've done it on a few people, including myself. I worked, I wanted to see how this worked. So luckily I had a patient of mine who ran an MRI facility who just, you know, without any cues from me, offered me the facility one Saturday, along with the radiologist and all the techs. So I went there, and before I went, I trained myself to do the side plank for 8 minutes. No, it sounds like a great thing, but it was against a wall. You know, I could do it against the wall that way because the MRI was composed of these two parallel plates about 18 inches apart and quite long. So I could actually do the pose and let them do the MRI, and they did it. And when I looked at it, it was quite remarkable what they did, but it took me a couple of months of training to get up to 8 minutes. And in the course of that, I gave myself 30 degrees of scoliosis. I had no idea that was going to happen, but it happened. So I'm a good example. I then did the pose on the other side, of course, and got rid of the scoliosis completely. But I noticed what happened to my shoulder, and then I stopped to see if it would come back. And then I did another MRI, another X-ray, maybe 6 months later. It had not come back. Okay. But there's a related difficulty, and I've tried with a few other people. I'm reluctant to try because I don't want them, of course, to get worse. They're better, so be it. But I found a couple of things. One is very interesting. If you start doing this pose, it's quite powerful. And I've had a couple of cases of this. One was a yoga teacher working in my office with me, and she had 22 degrees of scoliosis. And she wanted to learn the pose. And so I taught her the pose, of course, very early on. And she did the pose. And I said, you know, 6 months later, it's time we got another X-ray to look. She said, oh, no, I'm a yoga teacher. I know what I'm doing. And she waited more than a year and, I don't know, 8 months or something before she got her X-ray. And she had a right-sided scoliotic curve. Well, when she got the X-ray 20 months later, she had a small left-sided curve. Right. Too far. And so you've got to look at these people carefully. There's a new kind of X-ray, newish, called EOS, EOS. You probably have it across the pond too, over there in the Great Water. It's about 1/10 the radiation of the normal X-rays. I mean, there's a good Danish study that shows that the repeated X-rays, consonant with appropriate care for scoliosis, it raises the risk of various cancers in the children that need them. That doesn't mean you shouldn't get them, but it means you should be aware. And these EOS ones are really much lower in the radiation. So and with them, there's really no fear. You can get them every 6 months or whatever you like.
I always wonder about the error margin as well with X-rays.
Yes, but there's an error margin, and my thoughts about it are it goes both ways. You know, either sometimes it's too little and sometimes it's too much. So if you're averaging 100 patients, chances are it's going to wash out. There'll be as many that are averaged too high as are averaged too low, or nearly as many. And with large numbers, a small asymmetry isn't going to make any difference. You know, a discrepancy of that size is meaningless.
Yeah. So the purpose of those poses, obviously, or that treatment in a way that you're offering, is mainly to reduce the curvature, isn't it? Yes. It's not, and with that, hopefully, to reduce pain, but it's not necessarily to reduce pain.
Well, it does. It's funny, I have an NIH grant to work on an objective scale for pain, but we didn't pick scoliosis. We picked something else with yoga involved in it too, and it's going very well. So far, it seems to be true. But anyway, pain does, let's face it, there are two possibilities. There is pain due to scoliosis, and there is pain that people who have scoliosis suffer, but the pain is not due to the scoliosis. Now, if the pain is due to the scoliosis, I've noticed in a large number of cases where they've got pain, they've got scoliosis, but I get an MRI and I do an EMG, I do a full medical workup to be sure that it's the scoliosis that is causing the pain. The man I learned about scoliosis from, Stanley Hoppenfeld, worked with Harrington in Sheffield, England. You know, the great master Harrington of old. And he believed scoliosis is never painful. So I'm still somewhat, I'm convinced that is not true. There are cases where scoliosis is painful, but they are not as frequent as one would believe. Very often the pain is due to something else, and the most evident feature of their spine is their scoliosis. And so people are inclined to heap the blame on that cause, but it doesn't always fit there. That's what I've found. So anyway, I've looked at a number of people where I've ruled out all the other conditions, and it is the scoliosis that's causing the pain. And a large number, I mean, I'd say a representative number of those cases, when the scoliosis improves, the pain remits. You know what?
Remains.
No, remits. The pain
remits. Okay.
Goes away, resolves, goes away, gets proportionately less.
Right.
And also, so far in my experience, which is not vast, a couple hundred cases, you know, but what I found is that the rotation also seems to resolve, go away, when you do the same thing, when you improve the curve. And that, I mean, I explained that to myself, saying there are very few people that have rotation who don't have scoliosis. Therefore, the rotation is due to the scoliosis. And if you improve the scoliosis, you know, apart from some functional autonomy that a twist may develop, it's going to improve. And it does. So those are my results so far. I've published a couple of studies. I'm working right now on a third bigger one because I have a lot more cases now. Mm-hmm. But it's just very unusual that people don't get better. And of course, once in a while, someone gets worse.
Right.
So far, I mean, I'm working at that. I'm saying, you know, it's a hope against hope. I don't want to have so many cases where they get worse, but I need more cases to figure out what's going on with them.
Mm. So are there any like people, or maybe they have other conditions where you would, they come to you and say, I want to reduce my curve, but where you would say, no, I don't think this is going to work for you, or these poses are not recommended for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. There is one condition that I found that doesn't make it impossible, but it makes it a lot harder. That is where there's lateral listhesis. You know, the vertebrae are stacked one upon another with an opening in the middle, like a series of old Chinese coins. And sometimes one is slid forward, sometimes one is slid back. That's okay. That doesn't seem to affect the efficacy of our treatment. But if it's slid to the side, then that makes it much harder for the method to work. I think it's because the paraspinal muscles will attach to the transverse processes out on the side. And when the transverse process is further lateral, it doesn't have the same effect. It tends to compensate for any improvement we try to make. However, I have several patients, another one of these wonderful cases, this was a woman who had osteogenesis imperfecta, professor from upstate New York, 88-degree thoracic curve, 60-degree lumbar curve. I worked with her for several years. She wasn't getting any, she had this lateral listhesis, and no surgery would ever do anything for her because of the state of her bones. I was losing faith in my own work with her. She was not losing faith in me. She came down one day on her way to the Caribbean, said, how are you doing? You know, and I said, I'm fine. How are you? She said, well, I got an x-ray. Take a look. Her curve, her thoracic curve had gone from 88 to 58 degrees in about, I don't know, 3 or 4 months, 6 months. I don't remember exactly. And the lumbar curve had followed suit. It had gotten much bigger. So I asked her what she's doing. I went through this and all the different things I thought might be doing it. None of them were true. Finally, she volunteered, said, oh, I'm doing the pose 5 times a day now, though. And wow. That's the difference. Dose, result, dose, effect.
Brilliant.
Dose, response. Yeah, go ahead.
So could we go into, because there always seems to be this great confusion about, first of all, which poses. So you're recommending now 2 poses. I think it's plank. Sorry?
For the thoracic spine, I recommend 2. For the lumbar spine, I recommend 1.
Okay.
It seems to work so well. that there's no reason to, you know, if I found a better one, I'd surely use it. And there may be a better one out there, but the one I've got seems to work and I'm sticking to it.
So it's the side plank for the lumbar curves and
yes,
side plank and half moon for thoracic curve, for S curves.
yes, but it's Christine, it's a different side plank. It's not the same thing.
You tell me.
So you want me to show you? Is that what you want to show and tell?
Yes.
Okay. Here's the part that gets confusing. The curves are always named for their convex side. Think of a man, an archer holding a bow. It's always named for the side with the arrowhead on it, for the outside of the bow. The part that is not where the man is holding the arrow, but the other side, opposite the bowstring.
Yes.
So here, I'm assuming that my lumbar curve is convex to the left.
Okay.
Come down onto the floor. I guess you'll see me in a second. I take my left hand and put it down, and then I raise my legs up like this. Now, I'm against this couch, but a wall would be better. My arms should be collateral, so that collinear, so that a line through both of them would lead to the center of the earth. Okay. My feet must be stacked. Let me move over a little bit so you can see that. My feet must be stacked one on top of the other like this. If I have one foot forward like this, it doesn't work. Don't ask me why, but it doesn't. This is the way my body, this couch is moving. Elegantly moving.
Health and safety, please.
Now it's back against half of it is back. Okay, safety first, right. Some other important points. Yeah, the torso should be a straight diagonal line. Another point, your head, you should make your torso long. Another point, you could, below your ribs, way down here at your flank, you could try to raise up there. Now,
right.
Not to raise your hips, but just to raise that. Easy. If you do, as children often do, they come up like this. It's easier, they can stay there longer, but it doesn't work.
Okay.
Straight line like this, which is quite hard, which has its good point in that you don't have to do it for very long because you get tuckered out mighty quick. But it has a bad point in that it feels like it's difficult.
So is there a beginner's version? I've seen you do this on the forearm as well.
Let me show you the very beginner version and then go through. Now, if you're doing that and your shoulder starts to hurt, yes, you can do it on the floor. Put your elbow in the crevice between the floor and the wall behind you, like this. And then you come up like this. Now, in a way, you'd say this is harder because your torso is more horizontal, so more weight is on your arm. And that is true. But it doesn't seem to work quite as well. Works well, doesn't work quite as well.
Okay.
Now, I've had people so debilitated, honestly, some can only do it on their hip, like this. I'm down on my hip and they're raising this up. And that's quite good for them. Some can only do it on their knees, like this. And some, honest to goodness, they're down like this, and all they can do is raise like this. I don't even know if you can see this undetectable movement. But I'm trying to raise my flank here.
Yeah.
And they do this for about a week. Does this help them? I have no idea. But then they come on their hip like this. And then a few weeks later, they come up on their knee. And this really works. And then eventually they come up like this. Okay?
Great. Thank you.
That's for the lumbar curve.
Yes, that's for the lumbar curve. So we do this on the convex side of the lumbar curve.
Exactly.
What about thoracic curves?
Now, what about thoracic curves? Now, let's assume it's a person with a S curve, so that they're going to have their thoracic curve is going to be on the right. So I'm taking the belt again, putting it around my foot. Then bracing against the chair, the couch in this case, I'm raising my leg up as high as I can, and my arm, I could pull much harder if I pulled like this, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to pull like this with my arm perpendicular to my torso. And the reason I'm doing it is because what I'm really working on are these muscles. So watch what I do. I'm going to try to do it. I raise those muscles up. Not this, but this. Not this, but this. So I'll show you what I'm raising. These very muscles, I'm raising up like this. Why? Because these are the only muscles that can do that. The two sides of my chest are parallel. So if I want these to come up, these must come up. And if I strengthen these muscles, I will be opposing the convexity of the curve here.
Yeah.
Well, you're not working quite as hard, so you have to stay up a little bit longer. But it works almost inevitably.
So this is for the right thoracic curve and for right thoracic left lumbar. Is that right?
Yes. Now there's another one. This one, I was happy when I first found this one out, but I wasn't as happy as I was with the side plank. It didn't seem to work quite as reliably. So we have found another one we haven't tried it. I'd say we've tried it 30 times, 40 times, that's all. But it seems to work very well in most of the cases. It does not work in all of them, but when it works extremely well. I mean, people going from almost surgical curves of 38, 42 degrees to tiny curves of 7 degrees was the best that somebody did. Now, this one, it's just like the side plank, as you said, Christine, but with a twist. And the twist is that you elevate your feet. So you do it, in this one you can do on your forearm. It's a perfectly reasonable way to do it. You come down, I don't know if can you see me?
Yeah, can see very well.
Then you put, you use your, I'm doing it on my right. So the left leg you use to put your right foot up there. Then you put your left foot on top of it. So the feet are stacked once again. Oops, you see me?
Yes, can see you. That looks very difficult.
It's just that my elbow is against the floor here because the carpet doesn't go this far. That's all it is. That makes it look much more difficult than it is. But I'm not doing it very well. Now I can do it a little better.
Good. So it's like a floating side plank.
A floating side plank is a great name for it. Yes, it's a floating side plank. I think I probably could do better if I do it on my full arm, though I encourage other people to do it on their forearm. Yeah, I can do it better this way. So, and once again, you want to raise this part up a little bit, like that.
Mm-hmm.
There it is.
Yeah.
It's the floating side plank. I love your name for it. It's got a new name, Christine.
It's got a new name. Good.
And that one, again, you do it for as long as you can. And if your shoulder hurts, you do it on your forearm.
Right.
Like, the fact that I could do it so poorly, I, a man who does yoga every day and have done it for 40 years, indicates its difficulty.
It is difficult, yeah. So who is this one for?
The same thing, for a thoracic curve that is convex to the right.
Convex to the right. Okay.
Now so now I think those are the three poses that I've used with a fair amount of relief for a lot of people. And I can't recommend them too much, but I could try. Go ahead, keep asking.
Yeah, so it's just to clarify. So if I have a lumbar curve with a little bit of a thoracic curve, I do the side plank.
Yes, and you might want to do a little bit of what we just did too.
Yeah.
Where you would do the half moon pose on the opposite side, and you would do the flying the flying side plank.
The floating side plank, yes.
Floating side plank on the opposite side.
On the opposite side. Okay. So if I have a big right thoracic curve with a small lumbar curve, I would do half moon pose on my right side with the left leg lifted.
Mm-hmm.
And what's the purpose of the belt? I haven't quite.
Oh, well, with the belt, you pull. I couldn't show you that. I'm not sure you saw it. When you're horizontal like this in the half moon, your arm is up like this.
Yeah.
This.
Yeah.
So you have very terrible leverage. So when you pull this way, either your body will crunch up like a shrimp like this, or else you'll use the other side. You use this side, the right side of your body, to pull up like that. To resist the tendency to curl up to the left. And that's where you will strengthen the right side.
Okay, so it's not to hold your leg up.
Not at all. No, in fact, were you to, able to pull down with your leg to make more tension there,
right?
That would be better. But what it's to avoid, I think I should draw this for you. Here, I happen to have a page. So here's someone doing the side plank, all right? There's their head. There's their body. There's one leg down. Can you see this?
Yeah, if you hold it up a little bit more.
There's someone doing the side plank. Well, there's the leg. There's the arm. And then if their other arm is up just like that, and they raise this leg like this with a belt connecting them, then as they pull, here they are, they're pulling this way. Of course, the leg is offering resistance this way. So what would normally happen in that circumstance is that their torso would come up like this, because these two would tend to come together. If the arm didn't move, then the torso would move and come up like that. So to resist that, the other side, this side, pulls down a lot. And that's what we're interested in doing, because that's the side we want to strengthen.
Okay.
Is it at all clear? I hope it is. If not, I could make up a slide and send it to you.
Yeah, that would be great. If you have anything visual, I think that would be really, really helpful. Just so obviously people want to make sure that they're doing the right side.
Yeah, of course. But the basic thing is you want to strengthen the convex side in each case. And a little common sense applied there will make it clear. And if it isn't clear, people write me letters every day about this, and you feel free to write me, Loren at sciatica.org, SCIATICA. You can write to me and I'll do the best I can with it.
Oh, thank you so much. So it's basically on the convex side, the muscles are long, and they're long and weak, and we want to shorten them and strengthen them. No?
Yes, yes. I mean, I think to me, for hundreds of years, most people got it dead wrong. When you had a curve that bulged out like this, the ribs naturally spread apart. They splay out like an Asian fan, like the spokes of a wheel. And then they spread the soft tissues and the muscles and the skin. And then they rotate back into the space created by their separation. That's what happens. And it's hard. It's big. People say, oh, that must be the strong side. Paradoxically, that must be the strong side. Well, it isn't. It's the weak. It's stretched tight as a drum. And like a drum, it's hollow. The strong side is the side that's contracted on the other side. I mean, the analogy I use, I don't know if I have anything that fits. Well, the analogy I use is like if you go for a rural drive, you see a tower sticking up, a radio antenna. And there are wires on each side pulling down. Paradoxically, it's the pulling down that holds the antenna up. Well, were the wires on this side to pull more strongly than those on this side, then the tower would start to curve that way. And that's just what we do, except with us, we have ribs. So the ribs, I'm holding this, the ribs are on this side. Oh, what? The ribs are on this side, splaying out, rotating back, and looking as though that's the big, strong side. But it isn't. It's the tightness, like the cables on the radio antenna. They're stronger on this side. That's what pulls it this way. So I think that may make it clear what's going on. I mean,
that makes sense, yeah.
And I mean, one strong support for this that I've found is, you put a couple of studies together. It's a Japanese study showing that little boys there's as much scoliosis in little boys as there is in little girls when they're 3 years old. Some obsessive compulsive pediatrician looked for scoliosis in infants and saw that it's the same. Boys and girls the same. But by the time they're 15 or even younger, the girls have 9 times as much scoliosis as the boys. Now, why does this happen? How could it happen? Well, there's another fact, which is between the ages of 5 and 15, the boys get twice as strong as the girls. Talking about averages, there are mighty women and there are feeble men, but on the average, that's what happens. So if there were a small discrepancy between this side and this side, the boys, let's say 5 pounds of discrepancy, okay? And both of them as little infants only have about 20 pounds of strength. So it's 1/4 of what they have. They're 1/4 stronger on this side and weaker on this side. And then the girls get from 40 to 80 pounds. Well, it's still 5 out of 80, isn't it? It's still, what is that? It's about 14%. It's a lot of change. The boys don't go from 40 to 80, they go from 40 to 170 or 140. So the boys, it's a much smaller, 5 pounds is a meaningless discrepancy. So it doesn't cause scoliosis in them. But for the girls, it's a bigger proportion. It's like, you know, if a billionaire loses a $20 bill, so what? But if a man who is living from paycheck to paycheck loses a $20 bill, it's serious.
Yeah, absolutely.
Am I making sense? Is that clear, or is it a little?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, sorry, just to come back to our different curves. So the C curves, in a way, they are the easier ones.
The C curves? Oh yes, by far. Yeah, although some are thoracolumbar. They bridge the gap there, and so you have to do several poses anyway because you do them all on the same side in that case.
Okay.
Because there's a large C curve that goes from T7, the 7th thoracic, down to the 4th lumbar. Well, then you do the side plank for the lumbar part of it. Let's say it's on the right side, so you do it on the right. But then the thoracic part of the curve is also on the right side. So you do the half moon and you do the floating side plank also on the right side.
Okay, so there's a lot going on. Oh, there's a little...
You have a floating object there, an unidentified floater.
Yeah. Good. Amazing. Thank you so much. There's a lot to digest, I think, for people, and I try to make this a little bit more visual. So I see if I can put some little images into our video as well.
Okay, well, good. Well, if the video comes back to me, I gave it. The videographer has it now and is editing it and doing things like that. If it comes back to me within the next few days, I'll send it to you, and then you can put it out what you like with it.
Oh yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, and I'll make a little slide. It'll be like a cartoon slide showing you what happens in this with a little description below it.
Yes, lovely.
Okay.
And there's also, you said you have a webinar, is that right? Recorded from the beginning of the year?
Yes, I have an early webinar. I think it was February 19th, something like that. If anybody wants to see it, I mean, I go over all of this and quite a bit more too. You can go to my website, which is sciatica.org, sciatica.org. And then I have a page there called the store. Even though it's an org, even though it's a not-for-profit, we do sell things on it, as many do, and we sell access to that. I mean, I did it. It was very well attended, I must say, and some people couldn't get in. It was too crowded. They couldn't do it. So I recorded it and I made it available for a recording. They just do this on Zoom, same thing that we're on right now, and they record it. And if anybody's interested, they can go to my website and go to the store and look for Scoliosis webinar and click on it, and they'll get there sooner or later.
Okay, I will link to that as well in the description so people can find that quickly. Okay. Any other resources or anything else that we could look at?
Well, are your people mainly in Britain, or are they all over Australia?
No, they'll be all over the world.
All over the world. Well, good. Well, then I Skype with people all the time about this, and I keep records, and the people that I Skype with get better just as regularly as the people that come into my office. And if they want to Skype, they can just call my office and we'll set up an appointment. And my office number is 212-472-0077. So I'll write that to you too, so you can.
Yeah, so I can just put that in the description, so they can get in touch. And then obviously an X-ray is probably useful, isn't it, for you to?
Oh, absolutely. The X-ray, and it's a curious thing. scoliosis has long been sort of dominated by the surgical impulse. It's the surgeons that have made all the decisions and invented all the nomenclature. All the words, all the categories are basically oriented towards, do they need surgery or don't they need surgery? And if they do, what kind? It's quite impressive to look at how much it's tilted the field that way. And that's partially because bracing has been minimally effective. I mean, there's one brace I could sort of recommend because it's better in its results than the others, called SpineCore. It's Italian, and I think it comes out of a university in Rome, SPINRE-CORE. And it seems to be better than some of the others. And but they're largely, they don't cure anybody. They just make the curve. They seem to keep the curve from getting worse. And there's the physical therapy and all the Schroth and the clear and all the methods people have. And they simply don't seem to work very often. They do work once in a while. I know they do. But I see too many people that have tried them, you know, and it destroys their family hours a day. They're working with these devices. And this does not seem to be so good, and so people gravitate naturally towards the surgery, which works. The unfortunate part about it is that the young girl, I mean, put yourself in the position of a young girl. Maybe you know somebody that had scoliosis when she was a young girl. She's, her body is changing. So she wants to see what she looks like. You know, her intimate impulses are gathering. So she wants to go to the matinee show and sit in the balcony with her boyfriend and hold hands. And she has her peer group affiliations are changing from her parents to her friends. You know, at age 16, what goes on in school is more important than what goes on at home. So then you put this brace on her. So she can't see her body. She's alienated from her very self. Going upstairs in the balcony when you're wearing this tight chitinous shell isn't a lot of fun, not very alluring to the boy of her fancy. And these children, just at the time that they're socializing, often, not always, but often get ostracized. They're drifting away from the group. They can't play, they can't go swimming, they're not no fun at the beach, they can't dance the same way at parties. They're disabled in a way, temporarily and artificially, but it's disablement all the same. And I told this to a woman. I was trying to persuade her to do the side plank. And so I said this to her, and she burst out crying. And I said, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt your feelings. And she said, you just described me. And I know when I was in grammar school, there was a girl named Phyllis, I watched her, she went to the same high school I went to too. I watched her drift away from the group. It doesn't always happen, but it happens enough. So it's time that we looked at this from a totally innocuous point of view, like these poses, which even if they don't work, it hasn't hurt them. They're not disabled. Their hopes may be dashed a little bit, but you can actually, I mean, the surgeons, they don't look at you till it's under 25 degrees. We just do expectant observation. But here's a method you could use if it were 13 degrees or 17 or 7. Everyone with a 55-degree curve at one point had a 7-degree curve. No? Of course they did. If it were caught in the bud, the results might be entirely different. And so far, you can't tell because no one gets two histories, one with the brace and one without. But we do see many children who are in that volatile period getting better instead of either staying the same or deteriorating. So I think it has a lot to recommend it. And from a financial point of view, considering, I figured it out one day, the government spends the United States, about $7 billion a year on scoliosis. And if they paid for a $75 yoga lesson, they could avoid a whole lot of trouble and avoid a young woman or a man who's stiff for the rest of his or her life.
Absolutely. Definitely. One last question for you. What does your yoga practice look like?
My own?
Yes.
I do it every day. I kid myself. I say it's an hour, but it's more like an hour and a half, an hour and 3/4 every day. When my children were young, I would wake up at 5:30 and do it so that, because once the kids are up, all bets are off, and I still do pretty much the same thing. I wake up very early and do the yoga then. I've found some yoga for sleep. I sound like some charlatan, but it really does work also, the yoga for sleep, but it doesn't always work. And when it doesn't work, I do yoga in the middle of the night, maybe 3 a.m. I come down and do it. It's like, I'm like a religious man. Not that I'm religious, but I do yoga with that kind of fervor and regularity. I never miss a day. When I was a resident, I would be up all night. I'd do it twice the next day. It's a little obsessive compulsive, but I fish, I go to the movies, I read, I do other things. My wife and I take walks.
Brilliant. Well, your demonstration of the side plank was definitely very impressive. So.
Well, thank you. I did my best. The floating side plank, I think my floating side plank sunk. But there are better ones to be done, and I will try to show you one or two in the website or some other way.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you so much. I know I've taken up a lot of your time today.
Well, you're so welcome. You're a charming interviewer. You're really very good.
Oh, thank you so much.